Before we get started with the actual components of grammar, I just want to give you an overview about some of the research in regard to teaching grammar to English language learners. Many people have discussed this for a long time about whether English language learners should learn by explicit teaching of the grammar rules or through implicit actual use of the language. And I have read a lot of research about this. I have done presentations and I've written research about this from my own experience and my own research. And there are very good reasons for both. And there's research that supports both teaching of deductive and inductive or explicit implicit teaching of grammar. And my preference is the implicit way or the inductive way, whereas you don't necessarily teach the rules of the language, but through feedback and through students' use of the language, they begin to understand the rules, much like when we grow up, we implicitly learn the rules of the language. And that will be one challenge that you will probably face as you teach English language learners, because a lot of times they want to know the rule and you know the right or wrong answer, but you don't necessarily know how to explain the rule. So sometimes that can be challenging. In this 15-hour course, I am not going to be able to cover all the aspects of grammar. We're going to touch on the highlights, and you can see the topics as they're listed on our Moodle page. And so we'll have a challenge. What is most important? I know some of the syntactical features you went over in the linguistics class, but we'll start with verbs. We'll look at some prepositions. We'll look at sentence structure. We will look at sentence combinations and some ways to teach those. I'm going to go over the highlights for advanced learners as well as beginning learners, and we'll start at it from that point of view. I will also make it possible for you to look at some of the research that supports implicit versus explicit teaching of grammar, and we will go through it in that way, and you can have a nice discussion. I will tell you that a lot of students like deductive teaching rather than inductive because it's easier for them to fill out worksheets and to listen to the teacher tell the rules of the grammar. But I am a big proponent of having the students actually do the work themselves and explain it to each other and listen to each other and use the pieces of the grammar, learn it through writing, learn it through their mistakes. If you think about mistakes that you've made in your life, big or little mistakes, think about it. You don't want to repeat those mistakes. And so a lot of times our students are afraid to make mistakes. But I was like, oh, good, you made a mistake. Now let's talk about how to correct it. And then, first of all, it also creates an environment where they feel comfortable and they know they're not going to be judged or laughed at or looked down on because they've made a mistake in the language. And so as we go through the week, I'll give you some ideas that I've used that have been helpful. And I will also let you look at what other people have used, because there are many different ways for the language to be taught. And different people have different personalities, and so I want you to get an idea of different ways and different perspectives. I change the way that I teach all the time because I love to read the research. I love to listen to what other people say, and so I'm always looking for new and better ways to teach. But I also have some tried and true ways that have been effective, and students have come back to me and said, because you did it this way, because we did it this way in the class, because you forced me to do it this way in the class, I actually understand it better because I had to explain it to other people, so I had to study it and learn it for myself. And so that's where we'll start. And once again, this is a 15-hour course, so this is going to be an overview. And I look forward to reading what you post. I look forward to the information that you find and ideas that you have, because it's going to be a creative process. Instead of one large lesson plan that you'll do at the end of this course, I'm going to have you create small mini lessons of grammar teaching throughout the next 2 weeks on the specific pieces that we're talking about. Then you can take these mini lessons and integrate them into other lesson plans where you have to create. For instance, in the class I teach for teaching reading, writing, and vocabulary, you have to create a 2-hour lesson plan. And so you can integrate some of these mini lessons into my plan or into someone else's plan, because I don't want you to create a lesson plan for 2 hours that focuses only on grammar, because the research does show that that is not effective, and that students, verbal linguistic learners, would probably sit on the edge of their seat. But as we know, we have many different types of learners and in our classes. And I know that a lot of the research now is saying that we shouldn't concentrate so much on learning styles, but there are strengths, there are ways that students like to learn. And even though we don't emphasize that, the trend is now that we don't emphasize that as much as in the past, probably 15 years ago or 10 years ago even. I do know that it is important to understand that from the student's perspective, not to get focused on it, because some students then turn that into I can't learn by listening to you. When we all need to learn and grow in ways. I prefer to write things down versus having to memorize them, but that doesn't mean I don't need to learn to work on my memory. So in that way, I want us to emphasize the different pieces of grammar in mini lessons. And so you'll create 4 of those over the next 2 weeks that you can integrate into other lesson plans, whether it's for the certificate program or whether it's for lesson plans that you use in the future. So I look forward to working with you. I look forward to having this time with you over the next 2 weeks. And please feel free to contact me through email if you have any questions. And we'll move on to our next lesson in verbs.